Hello, I'm J.S. Watts, and today I'm going to read you the first chapter from my novel Old Light. Old Light is book 2 in the Witchlight series, which began Holly Jepp's adventures in the novel Witchlight, and you can see both covers over my right shoulder. So, this is chapter 1 of Old Light. He was, to a casual observer, a small, unexceptional man, precisely dressed in a well-pressed grey suit, a crisp white shirt, and a plain, to the point of boring, dark blue tie, except boring was too positive an adjective for the overall effect. Also, the crispness of the shirt was being seriously threatened by the rivulets of sweat currently pouring down his face and neck, and increasingly his upper torso. This profuse sweating was unpleasant for a wide range of fairly obvious reasons. It was also remarkably surprising in an experienced 100-year-old witch. Not that he looked like a centenarian practitioner, more like a 40-year-old auditor who was badly out of his depth. The cause of his embarrassing perspiration problem was sitting directly opposite him at home in her own comfortably but expensively antique furnished lounge. If you didn't know her, you'd have said she was in her late 20s, but whilst her mid-brown hair was immaculately bobbed and her face and figure were attractive, she wasn't generating the sort of sexual allure that makes grown men break out in a hot, salty sweat. She was wearing a classically plain and shapelessly rather prim beige cashmere dress and balancing a delicate porcelain teacup and saucer on her right palm. Slightly repositioning her 5-foot, 100-pound frame in the 18th century leather fireside chair she was sitting in, Holly Beldam continued to stare far from casually at her troubled visitor. And why, exactly, Brother James, would I want to do that? It's really quite an honour, Sister Beldam. Very few are invited to assist the coven in its endeavours, and of those who are, even fewer are ladies, let alone ladies who have come into their powers quite so late in mundane life as yourself. But then again, mine are extremely strong powers for a lady. Or a man, come to that. Indeed they are, Sister Beldam, and with them you could help the coven mightily. As I said before, Brother James, why exactly would I want to do that? Brother William James felt another wave of telltale sweat soak into his once pristine and now decidedly soggy shirt. Holly was still staring at him, and now she wasn't blinking. William was reminded of a hungry and rather irritable bird of prey that was considering whether the object in its line of sight was edible. He broke her gaze by glancing down towards his feet, only to find a pair of bright green eyes looking up at him. They weren't blinking either. Their owner, a sleek, black and white, short-haired cat, was studying him the way it would a fascinatingly plump rodent. William wondered whether wearing the mouse grey suit had been such a good idea. He looked back up at Holly. Her wide hazel eyes were still fixed on him, and she was waiting. He automatically attempted to loosen his now rather constricting shirt collar with a damp index finger as yet more sweat trickled down his neck. I've mentioned the honour, right? The very high honour given your gender. Holly nodded slowly without breaking eye contact. It was not an encouraging nod. The abnormal strength of your witchlight could really help to make a difference. So many possibilities. Plus, your working closely with us could help us understand old magic that much better. There are so few practitioners left. And why do you think that is, Brother James? There was a brief, uncomfortable pause. It's okay. I'm not expecting you to tell me. Indeed, I'm going to tell you. Holly pointed a finger sporting an ornate moonstone ring directly at Brother James. For generations, your coven has chosen to persecute those of us who are able to harness natural magic. Pursued, persecuted, and killed. Yes, one of my family has, until very recently, been stupid and misguided enough to kill our own in the name of preserving the magic, but that is now history. The coven has been doing what it does for far, far longer. And what does it do, by the way? When I was trying to stay alive long enough to save me and mine and put an end to the killing, what did the coven do? Nothing. Abso-bloody-lutely nothing. I can only assume that a little under a year ago they'd have been more than happy to see me die. Yet here you are, on their behalf, asking me to help them. Let me tell you, Brother James, I am willing to help them by just as much as they help me. Tell them that, will you? The hazel eyes blinked, and William James suddenly felt as if he had been released from invisible but very strong bonds. He was up and out of his seat almost instantly. He even managed not to look back to check for sweat marks on the chair's upholstery. Oh dear, Brother James, off already? I was about to do my duties as a little lady hostess and offer you another cup of tea. No, thank you, but no, I really couldn't presume. I have taken up so much of your time already and your hospitality. I really should be going. As he propelled himself towards the lounge door, he almost trod on the black and white cat. He staggered, but thrust a rather clammy hand forward and braced himself against the nearest wall. A pair of aggrieved green eyes shot him a look of reproach, and was suddenly joined by a pair of saffron yellow ones, as a large marmalade cat emerged from under Holly's chair and, hissing, blocked his line of escape. "Grindlebones," admonished Holly. The ginger cat walked slowly and rather reluctantly back towards her. "Is that Partridge Mayflower's familiar?" William surprised himself by asking. "No, he's one of mine. But Partridge was his witch before being incinerated alive, trying to give me the help the coven wouldn't offer me. I took Grindlebones in and looked after him. He adopted me. Did you know cats have surprisingly long memories? Very sensitive animals, cats." A pause. "If you like, Grindlebones can escort you to the front door." "No, I'm fine. Really, I can find my own way out." "Not nearly quickly enough," said a voice in his head. He wasn't sure if it was his subconscious or a woman's sarcastic voice he was hearing, but he didn't stop to ponder the matter. Opening the lounge door, he walked as quickly as he could, without running, along the plain, white-walled hallway. It was a relatively short walk, but he could have sworn the hallway was longer than it had been when he had entered the cottage. It certainly felt as if it was. Before he had reached the end of the hall, the heavy wooden front door swung open of its own accord and, as soon as he had exited through it, swung to again behind him. It closed with a resounding thud, but Brother William James, senior witchfinder to the Grand Coven of Great Britain, Ireland and the Etheric Isles and their domain, did not hear it. He had already disappeared in an implosion of pale grey light. Inside her old and rather picturesque black and white cottage, Holly was making a big loving fuss of her two cats. "Well, do you think that'll get my message back to the coven, boys? They've been persistent, I'll give them that. What do you think they'll come up with next?" Outside in the lane, at the front of the cottage, a big grey rabbit suddenly appeared, ran across the road towards the black and white timbered cottage, scurried into the base of the thick hawthorn hedge surrounding the property's unseasonably colourful front garden. There it sat, and cleaned its large and alert ears, while keeping its darkly watchful gaze focused on the cottage. That's the end of chapter 1. If you're interested in more details about Old Light, you can find further details on my website, www.jswatts.co.uk. Thank you for listening.